Back to Miller. Oh, my goodness.
Herbert.
Sidearm sling, and it's a touchdown.
Tyrese Maxey.
Oh, good spin move by Filipowski for the news. Give him 9.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Beef Upfront podcast here on Pick Swap Media. Potentially my last show ever, recording this before the Phillies play Game 7. I'll probably retire, never come back to do another podcast if they lose this game. And this podcast won't be coming out until after this game, most likely tomorrow. So a lot of nerves riding on this one. But as always, this is the weekly Beef Upfront college football show. Your host, Ryan Coyle, joined by Joe Kmetz, as we bring you the top 5 games of the week in college football. And then we throw in the top group of 5 game as well. Give you our pick straight up against the spread, the over-under, and then we throw in some locks of the week and some dogs of the day as well. So, as always, Joe, welcome back. And before we start, will the Phillies be advancing to the World Series?
Yes. My play of the day, Phillies -1.5. Bryce Harper home run, Trey Turner hit. Odds boosted it to 942. That thing is smacking. I'm not even saying – and I am a Mets fan, so the Phillies are rivals. But I'm saying if you do not think – and I'll even knock on wood for you, Coyle, so it wouldn't be my fault. The bank is going to be rocking. The first ever Game 7 in franchise history, that's actually crazy. That's not being talked about enough. And they got Puffad, however you say his last name, for the Diamondbacks. During the regular season, he had like a 5.3 ERA or something like that. I mean, I don't know. I think the Phillies are going to win. I don't want to be the reason why they lose. That's why I'm knocking on wood. I don't want to be the
Yeah.
But all I'm saying is if you guys win, please beat the Rangers, because I do not want to see Scherzer and DeGrom posting with their rings. I'll lose my mind.
All right, well, that's enough for the baseball talk. Like we said, by the time this is out, we'll already know the result of the game. So we'll recap last week real quick. Pretty good week for me. 11-7 straight up, or excuse me, total. 5-1 straight up on the picks. 2-4 against the spread. Struggled a little there. 4-2 on my over-unders, and then I went 0-1 on my dog of the day. I forget who my dog of the day was off the top of my head from last week. And then, as always, I'm boycotting locks of the week for the rest of the way. My quote-unquote lock of the week every week for the rest of the season is just USC overs, and that's hit. So I haven't put the jinx on it yet. Joe, you went 8-10 last week. You went 4-2 straight up, 2-4 against the spread, 2-4 total, 0-1 on your dog, and 0-1 on your lock of the week. Oklahoma not hitting for you, but still you've hit, I believe, 8 out of your past 10 locks of the week or for the season so far. So it can't get much better than that. All right, we'll get into this week's slate. We've talked about it the past few weeks. We've been pretty spoiled with some really good games and some really good slates. This one is a little bit more underwhelming. We still got a couple, big marquee matchups. We'll break down Oregon and Utah. Georgia and Florida is always one of the probably like 10 most anticipated games of the college football season. So we still got a few good ones. But we'll start it off in the Big 12, actually, with number 6 Oklahoma traveling to Kansas. This will be the noon kickoff on Fox. Fox, the big kickoff game here. So basically, the college game day version of Fox. Big time for Kansas to have the opportunity to host this after hosting game day last year. Kind of just shows you the trajectory of that program right now. Oklahoma barely escaped UCF last week at home. Oklahoma comes in this one as a 10.5-point favorite, and the over-under sits at 66.5. Can the Jayhawks pull off the massive upset here, Joe?
I don't think so. I mean, we saw them, it was 2 years ago. They were beating Oklahoma in a game with them. Like, they opened up the stands to the public. That was when Caleb Williams was still at Oklahoma, and the crowd filled up as the game went on. And then he had that weird, as he was getting tackled, he handed it off to one of his teammates, and then they took it to the house, or if not to the house, picked up a big first down, and Oklahoma ended up, surviving and winning that game. But I think this game is going to be a lot closer than that. I believe Oklahoma is going to be able to cover in the end late. I don't know what it is. If Oklahoma can't cover this spread, I've already seen a couple of people talking about how they're kind of frauds and how they got up for Texas, but that was kind of it. Because outside of Texas, they've played nobody. They survived against UCF, and that was at home. I thought they'd be a lot more focused coming out of the bye week. They didn't do themselves any favors by, skirting by UCF, because if they do have to play Texas again and lose to Texas in a rematch, the style points do matter when you're starting to split hairs on those resumes. This isn't like March Madness where you can win. You win a close game, it doesn't really matter. Every single win, how you win, really matters and affects your playoff positioning. So I think this is going to be huge to see if Oklahoma can kind of bounce back and blow them out. I mean, this crowd's going to be rocking. It's not going to be like 2 years ago when there was like 20,000 people in the stands and they had to basically beg people on the radio to come into the game. This crowd's going to be rocking. I think Lawrence is going to be a great atmosphere, especially Coyle. Like you said, big noon kickoff's going to be there. Huge opportunity for the Jayhawks. I just don't think they're going to be able to get it done. They've had a couple opportunities this year that have already kind of slipped by them. I don't even know. Is Daniels playing or no?
Yeah, it looks like he's most likely going to miss this week, but Jackson Bean's been playing pretty well in his absence.
It just stinks. It feels like whenever he's hurt, it's always against like the good teams. And
Yeah.
I'm not saying it all, like that's on purpose. It just sucks that, that's the coincidence. Bean is still a pretty good backup. He's coming. We've seen him last year and even this year come in some big spots and have some good games. But I think without Daniels, I don't know if they'll be able to keep up with Oklahoma in this one.
Yeah, and this line being at 10.5, that stood out to me a little bit. Like we said, considering Daniel's most likely not going to play and Bean playing, I mean, he's a pretty good quarterback in his own right. And I think it's also kind of weird because, like, you go through most college teams, you wouldn't know their backup quarterback. You can acknowledge Jackson Bean and know him and that he's like a pretty solid player in his own regard. That's a good situation to have for Kansas, but still 10.5 here kind of stood out to me. I thought it'd be maybe like a 13.5, like a 2-touchdown type of one. Because Oklahoma has dominated historically over Kansas in this matchup. Oklahoma has not lost to Kansas since October 4th, 1997. Sooners are riding an 18-game winning streak, and each and every one of those wins has been by 10 points or more. So that's what we just call domination here at Beef Up Front. But you got two really dynamic offenses in this one. They combine to average 939.8 yards per game, with Bean looking to replace Daniels. But that could affect that maybe a little bit. But he's put up some points in some of these starts so far. Oklahoma, as you touched on, Joe, did not show up last week, only beat UCF by 2. And if they play with their foot on the road here, they might get upset by the Jayhawks. I love the balance. That's one of the big things I talk about with teams that are like the balance that they can present. The Jayhawks can hurt you both through the air and on the ground. They're averaging 231.1 yards per game through the air and 211.7 on the ground. So they can beat you both ways. Oklahoma's defense started the year out hot, but as you touched on, Joe, they didn't really play anyone yet. They're allowing 29.5 points per game over their last 2 games against Texas and UCF. Their defenses look more vulnerable. I still think Oklahoma will win this ball game, but I'm going to take Kansas to cover the number. I think that balance kind of can keep Oklahoma honest a bit. I think that defense is a little bit more fraudulent than we thought from the beginning of the season. So this is a big one for Kansas at home. Like you said, I expect the crowd to be rocking, but I will take Oklahoma to win it outright. But we'll go Kansas to cover in the over. So give me Oklahoma 37, Kansas 30. So or Kansas plus 10.5 in the over of 66.5. All right, probably the game of the weekend now, and I feel like that's been the theme for the past few weeks, and it's going to continue to be as we get more and more of these top-ranked Pac-12 teams going head-to-head. This is number 8, Oregon, at number 13, Utah, a 3:30 kickoff on Fox. Oregon is a 7-point favorite in this one as of Tuesday evening. The over-under is 49.5. The spread the other day when I first was looking through the games was 4.5, so it's already been moving. Joe, what are your thoughts on this matchup?
As much as I want to take Utah, because I feel like this is just a spot that screams Utah, I'm going Oregon here 21-10. So I'll take them to cover the 7. I'm going to go under 49.5. I think this is going to be a real, defensive slugfest. I think if this game was a night game, I'd be completely switched because there's nothing, and the guys at Barstool have talked about it before, like when those games start out west, the sun's setting. First quarter, Utah doesn't do great. Then that sun sets, and for some reason, it starts getting smoky and hazy for no reason. It's like they're doing some crazy like voodoo dance out there, and it gets all ominous. And then Utah just comes and punches you right in the mouth. I remember, Coyle, I think it might have been the first year you and I did the show, or maybe it was the year beforehand when Oregon was really good. They went out to Utah. We were still at school, and Utah beat them by like 40 points. Like it was never close from the start. And I wouldn't if that happened today, I wouldn't be shocked, but I just don't see. And the Pac-12's got to be sitting there like, are you kidding me? In our last year ever, Utah's just going to come and ruin everyone's day again and get into the Pac-12 title game with a loss or two and just completely mess up this conference. I think Utah is a little bit overmatched in this one. Oregon's a really good team. They were a late comeback away from being undefeated right now. And Utah, coming off a pretty comfortable win. They couldn't cover even in those uniforms against Washington State. But I think Oregon, is kind of righted the ship. Dan Lanning's definitely telling the guys, listen, we just keep playing our brand of football. There's no reason why we can't win out and, be sitting in the Pac-12 title game with a shot at the playoff. So I think Oregon's going to win this game here, even though I think Whittingham might be pound for pound the best coach in the country. Like, if you consider the resources he has at Utah, he might be the best coach. If there was a 12-team playoff the last 2 years, the Utes would be in it. I cannot wait for that next year, especially seeing how they do in the Big 12. But I think that the Ducks get it done in this one.
Yeah, I'm with you, Joe. Regardless, Kyle Whittingham's got to be a top 5 coach in the sport, just like you said, with the resources that he has, and just find a way to get it done and beat a lot of these more high-profile teams with better recruits and whatnot. But the note on this matchup, in their last 3 matchups, Utah has held Oregon to only 37 total points. So only 12.3 points per game, and the Utes are 2-1 in this matchup. So Utah has had Oregon's number over these past few years. Oregon's offense comes into this game averaging 47 points per game. Kyle Whittingham showed the ability to slow down a USC team last week that routinely puts up 40 points. He just knows, as you were kind of just talking about, he just knows how to win games. With usually the lesser team, he just finds a way to get it done. They are plus 210 on the money line in this one, and I think you have to take a serious look at that. Utah has won their last 16 games at home as well. I think there's good value on them on the money line there with all those trends, the way that they've defended Oregon historically. And I know they have a new coaching staff in there, but this is still an Oregon team that puts up a lot of points, just as we saw in the past with Chip Kelly, with Helfrich, all those guys. It's an Oregon team that likes to get up and down the field as quick as possible, score, and play in the 40s and 50s. And Utah has historically done pretty well against those type of teams. So, I think there's really good value on the money line there with Utah. I think their ability to stifle and slow down this Oregon team, where we saw in that Washington game, they go side to side a lot. Utah has guys that can run. They have physical guys that I think are going to be able to kind of slow down that side to side offense. So this team is at their best when they're doubted. I'm going to take Utah outright in this one. I'm going to go 27-21, Utah plus 7 and the under 49.5. And that's saying a lot for me because I'm a big believer in Oregon. I think that they're right up there as one of the top 5 or 6 best teams in the country. But just going back to some trends, and I just think Kyle Whittingham is going to make some smart coaching decisions in this one. Dan Lanning, as we saw in the Washington game, might get a little too aggressive at sometimes if things aren't going their way early. And I think Utah is able to kind of capitalize on that. So give me Utah plus 7 and the under of 49.5 there. All right, third game of the week, the SEC. Right before we started recording this, I saw a video on Twitter. People are already pulling their RVs into the lot in Jacksonville for this game, and it's Tuesday. So that just goes to show you the type of atmosphere and the meaning that this game has to those fans, both in Gainesville and Athens. But got number 1, Georgia, riding their 17-game win streak, I believe it is, playing Florida, the world's largest outdoor cocktail party. The neutral site game in Jacksonville every year, 3:30 kick on CBS. Georgia is a 14.5-point favorite here, and the over-under is 47.5. Joe, does Georgia remain unbeaten?
I think they do. I think it's going to, I think it's going to be close in the sense that Florida is going to cover the spread. However, I think it's going to be a 10-point win for the Dogs. I'm going Georgia 38, Florida 28. So I'll take the Gators to cover that 14.5 because that is a lot of points still for a rivalry game like this. Even last year, when Florida was really bad and Georgia was, even more dominant than this year, I still would have taken Florida to cover, and I don't think they did. But in a rivalry game, it's tough to, if you're giving me that many points, not to take them. And I'm going to go with the over here of 47.5, even though, if Florida is going to pull off an upset, you feel like, they might win a game in the trenches. But I like that number. I think 47 is a little bit too low. I know Georgia's playing without Bowers. I know they haven't looked great this season. I just still don't trust Florida. And I know they're a lot better, but they only beat South Carolina by 2. I think this game is a lot different if they lose that South Carolina game rather than if they win it. I still don't trust Graham Mertz. When I think of Graham Mertz, I think of the Wisconsin Graham Mertz. Even though Graham Mertz is quietly having a pretty solid season down there in Gainesville, I just can't trust him against this Georgia team. I think that it's going to be a close game. Like if you're going to, bet anything, maybe bet Florida first half spread. I do not know what that is off the top of my head.
Did you
but
read
I
my
think,
notes?
oh, I'm about to. Oh, well, I'm going to spoil it now for you, Coyle. I apologize. But Florida plus 7.5 for the first half spread. Love that bet. Didn't mean to steal your thunder, Coyle. I apologize. But I would definitely take that. And then I think Georgia can kind of pull ahead late. It wouldn't shock me if they cover that 14.5. But I mean, you're going to give me that many points in a rivalry game. I'm always going to take them. But I also haven't had my best year picking on this show. So what the heck do I know? If it's not a lock of the week, don't listen to me.
Yeah, and this is I think I might be falling into that trap that we saw with the Kentucky game too. Like we I think we both took Kentucky in that one plus the 14.5, and then Georgia just went out there and rolled them. It seems like Georgia might play up to their competition a little bit more. And when they play like some of these weaker teams, they play a little bit more down to it. But this line actually opened up at 20, I saw, and it's all the way down to 14.5 in Georgia's first game without Brock Bowers. The past 2 years, Georgia has taken down Florida by an average of 24.5 points per game. So they've dominated this. But this Florida team, I do think, is trending up. And we haven't seen the Georgia Bulldogs without arguably the best offensive player in college football, maybe besides Marvin Harrison and Brock Bowers. So I'm curious to see how this one goes because a lot of their passing game runs through him. I think like you were saying, I'm going to take Florida plus a 7.5 in the first half in this one. Georgia has struggled for most of the year in the first half, and they like to make those halftime adjustments, and they kind of impose their will after that. And now they don't have Brock Bowers. That's going to be more of an adjustment period. That line movement is surprising to me and gives me reason to believe, though, that the Gators are going to put up a fight in this one. You touched on it a little bit, but Graham Mertz is having a nicer season than many would think. Even that Utah game, looked at his stats in that one, he still threw for over 300 yards in that game. So he has 1,897 passing yards, 12 touchdowns, and only 2 interceptions on the year. Those 2 interceptions are critical because if he can take care of the football in this game, they're going to have a shot. Georgia hasn't been a very opportunistic team when it comes to turning the ball over this year. They only have 9, and that's only good enough, tied for 77th in the country with a slew of other teams. So if they take care of the football, I think they're going to hang around in this one. But as our good friend George Costanza once said, you want to get nuts? Let's get nuts. Give me the Gators to knock off Georgia in this one for the first time in 17 games. The Georgia Bulldogs find themselves with an L next to their name. I'm going to take Florida with a last-second field goal here, 27-26. So Florida obviously plus 14.5 and the over 47.5. But I'm going to take Florida to win this one outright. I think we're due for like a big-time upset. We had UNC losing to Virginia last week. I think we're due for one of these top teams to fall that we're kind of not expecting. So I'm going to go a little bit off the grain here. This is going to be a pretty wild pick. Wouldn't surprise me to see Georgia win this game by 21. But let's have some fun. If this does hit, that'll be a good little clip for the pod as well. So give me Florida 27-26 in this game. All right, fourth game of the week, a basketball matchup for most years. Maybe not this year with the way Louisville was last year, but number 20 Duke at number 18 Louisville. 3:30 kick on ESPN. Louisville is a 3.5-point favorite. Over under is 47.5. Can the Cardinals get a W here, Joe?
I think they will, Coyle. I'm going Louisville 33, Duke 23. Weird score. Kind of just typed it out, and I was like, oh, that looks weird, but we're just going to ride with it. I think Louisville can get a safety here. Duke maybe misses an extra point. Why not? You want to talk about getting nuts? Well, let's get a little nuts. Maybe sprinkle an exact score bet of 33-23. Why not? I really like this Louisville team. I mean, they showed they're legit by dominating Notre Dame. And like most teams that dominate Notre Dame, and I talked about this a couple shows ago, they went out and absolutely blew all their momentum. So I think now they're going to be able to turn it around. You get a top 25 team in Duke coming to town who had a really tough loss at Florida State. Riley Leonard doesn't go down. You don't really know what happens. I'm not saying they win the game, but it kind of seemed like Duke just gave up when Riley Leonard got hurt. They didn't really know what to do. They didn't have an answer. And is he playing, Coyle? I'm not keeping my injuries so far this week.
Yeah, it's one of those things where we probably won't know till Saturday. Just like the last 2 weeks when he was fighting the ankle injury, they didn't really announce it till late on Saturday whether he was playing or not. And the guy behind him has been an absolute non-factor so far. So It really will come down to it. But this spread kind of indicates to me that he might be playing because I think Louisville being at home this one, they'd probably be like a touchdown favorite without him.
Yeah, I would have to agree. 3.5 does seem a little bit low. I'm definitely taking the 3.5. I'm going to take the over in this game. Just like I said, without knowing about the status of Riley Leonard, I don't feel confident picking Duke. It just stinks, to see that early season momentum that Duke had just kind of falling flat on their faces. And they could potentially, they still have to play UNC. Who the heck knows about UNC anymore after that Virginia? I still don't understand how they lost that game. That was one like I looked at my phone and I'm like, how did that just happen? But ACC is really weird right now. Louisville might be the second best team in the conference, which is weird to say. But I'm going to go Louisville at home here. Wish this was a night game. They're really putting a lot of stock in, I'm going to spoil our next matchup, but really putting a lot of stock in Ohio State, Wisconsin to deliver for a primetime game. I definitely think the slate is very top-heavy this week.
Got World Series starting Saturday night too, competing with that as well. So, all right. My note on this game: these two teams have actually only played each other 3 times, but Duke has never defeated Louisville in either of those 3 matchups. So Louisville all time is 3-0 against Duke. Duke had that lead on Florida State in the second half last week, and they wound up losing by 18. As we touched on, with Leonard banged up, that offense basically goes to wash. I mean, that defense has to be near perfect for them to stay in the game. So Louisville is a weird team, though, to get a finger on, as you were kind of touching on, Joe. They dismantle Notre Dame, and then they get dismantled themselves by 18 against a very bad Pitt team in kind of a letdown spot after that big emotional win over Notre Dame. So what kind of Louisville team do we see this week? They're coming off a bye. They should be more rested. Their head should be kind of screwed on just right this game. So they still have a path to the ACC title game, though, and they do avoid playing Florida State. So they definitely have the path to eventually get there. So this is a Louisville team that has a lot to play for still. I think, as you touched on too, Duke's reeling a little bit, and if Riley Leonard doesn't play, they have no shot in this one. We kind of talk up Riley Leonard like he's a Caleb Williams or a Drake May or whatever you want to say, Jordan Travis, a Jaden Daniels, one of those guys, but he is super valuable to this team. He's not the most gifted like passer, pure quarterback, but he is what kind of makes that offense go because he's just a gamer, and as we talked to him, like a playmaker type. He has that swagger to him, that like Johnny Football type thing where, all right, it's a broken play, I'm going to take off and make something happen. And if he doesn't bring that element to this Duke offense, even if he does play, he might not be 100%. It's one of those things where do I really see them doing much damage? So I think the Cardinals come out in this one. They win at 27-20, so they cover the 3.5, and I'll go with the under of 47.5 there. That Duke defense is still really good. All right, we go to the Big Ten now, as you just touched on a little bit ago. Number 3, Ohio State traveling to Wisconsin. 7:30 on NBC. Ohio State is a 13.5-point favorite. Over under is 43.5. Joe, coming off the big win last week over Penn State, is Ohio State in a letdown spot here?
I believe so. In terms of the spread, I'm not ballsy enough to take Wisconsin outright. So I'm going to go Ohio State 28, Wisconsin 16. I think, in typical Wisconsin fashion, they're going to try to muck this game up, really make Ohio State, earn every yard, every, down, every score. And Ohio State, you're coming off such a massive win against such a big opponent. It's tough now. You got to go to Madison, and I know Wisconsin hasn't been, the Wisconsin of the past couple of years, like these last 2 years, but you got a new coach coming in there. You got a lot of juice around the program. Wisconsin is 5-2. They ended up coming back and beating Illinois. They play Big Ten West football, and the fact they're getting this game at home, I don't think the Ohio State players are really jacked up about this one. I don't know how many programs in the country would sign up for, going to Madison right now, especially for a night game. Jump around's going to come on. People are going to be going crazy. This might be another one of those, like I was saying for Florida, Georgia. Maybe take Wisconsin first half spread. Maybe, I could see Wisconsin being in this game late into the third quarter, like kind of how last year's Penn State game went, where Penn State, Ohio State, Penn State was in it late. Ohio State forced a late turnover. I think that was like the strip sack for the touchdown late. Or maybe it was a pick. I forget. I forget his name, Lafanga or whatever. He had the
44.
Yes.
Whatever his last name is.
Yeah, something like that. You know what I mean? And he returned that for a touchdown or returned it deep, and Ohio State ended up scoring. But I remember, they kind of ended up winning that game by double digits, even though it was a lot closer than that. I could see this being like a 21-17, 21-14 type game late. Ohio State kind of puts the game to bed. 13 and a half is a lot of points. I'm definitely going to take Wisconsin to cover that. But I still think Ohio State's going to be able to get it done. And then the game of the year for Luke Schubert Brown next week, Ohio State at 6-2 Rutgers. Whoever thought we'd be saying Rutgers is 6-2? Shout out Rutgers. But yeah, I'm going to go Ohio State in this one.
Yeah, my note on this matchup is Ohio State has actually won 9 straight against Wisconsin. I was pretty surprised to see that, and they own an average margin of victory over that span of 18.3 points per game. So they have just been dominating them. One of those includes that Big Ten championship where I believe it was 49-0. So that inflates it a little bit. But Wisconsin was supposed to bring like this new look offense in and put up a lot of points, and they've kind of got off to a slow start with that. In Big Ten play, they've had 38, 24, 6, and 25. I think that their goal is to be like a Ohio State or, a former Ohio State team. This team has kind of a different identity this year, but be a team that scores like 35 or so points per game. So they've been a little bit inconsistent in that regard. Now they have a backup quarterback in, and they're playing an Ohio State defense that blew me away last week. I was super impressed with them. The Notre Dame game was all right. I thought that was more so just a matchup of two physical teams. This Penn State team has been putting up a lot of points this year, and Ohio State really shut them down. They held them to 1 of 16 on third down, and that one conversion didn't come till late in the game when they were kind of playing prevent defense. So the defense has been carrying this team, and Marvin Harrison Jr. has been coming up, clutching some big spots to help them move the ball and get some first downs. As I said, the Badgers are working with a backup quarterback. I don't think they're going to be able to move the ball much on this Buckeyes defense unless Braylon Allen finds a way to have a big day and break a few runs. But the Badgers held that Penn State running back duo in check for the most part last week. So as long as Kyle McCord doesn't turn the football over and he gets the ball to Marvin Harrison when he needs to, I think the defense is good enough to shut down Wisconsin's offense in this one. So I'm going to take Ohio State to win and to cover and the under to hit. I'll go 27-10 Ohio State. So Ohio State minus 13.5 and under 43.5. All right, our sixth and final game of the week, the group of 5 game. We have UNLV football on the show. That is a first time for sure at Fresno State. Both of these teams are 6-1 in the Mountain West coming into this game. 10:30 kickoff on FS1. Fresno State minus 7.5. Over under is 58.5.
My running Rebels. I'm going to take UNLV 35, Fresno State 32. So I'm obviously going to take UNLV to cover. I'm going to go over because this just seems like it's going to be a fun over game. This game is going to go a long way in deciding the Mountain West right now. Currently in the top 5, with teams with only 1 loss or less in conference, you have Air Force, who's 19th in the country, UNLV, who's 3-0 in conference. Then you have Wyoming, Fresno State, Boise State, all 2-1. Wyoming actually plays Boise this week at Boise. Wyoming is plus 178, I believe, on the money line. Not my dog of the day, but if you're going to look at a dog, that was my number 2. But that being said, going back to this game, I really like UNLV. They have the win over Vandy, which I know, normally, win over Vanderbilt. But for UNLV to be an SEC team, I don't care that it's Vandy, is huge. UNLV for our entire lives, Coyle, has just been a doormat out in the Mountain West, or I believe they were in the WAC before the WAC.
Yeah, I got some numbers. I got some numbers on that.
They were, for the most part of our lives, they were not good. But they're looking really awesome this season. I would love to see them pull off this upset and, keep this momentum going. I would really like to see UNLV potentially, if they can win out. I think that I want to see different teams get good. And I think UNLV has the potential, being out in Vegas with the NIL era, with gambling, on the rise more and more. And the fact that they get to play in that new, I believe it's Allegiant Stadium where the Raiders play. Mm-hmm. They share that stadium. Beautiful stadium. Top of the line facilities because they get to use the NFL facilities. UNLV has an opportunity, if they can get the right coach in there, to potentially start getting some good recruits and become a very good G5 school, potentially the next Boise State type of school. UNLV's always had that potential being out in Vegas, but now that gambling is legal, you could see UNLV go up really, really quick if the right people get behind them.
Yeah, Barry Odom, the coach now, he was a former coach at Mizzou. I believe this is his first year, so he's really, flipped the script with them.
Yeah, I mean, this is huge for UNLV. And Barry Odom, I think he had 1 year at Mizzou where they were in the top 25. I think, at least for one season or at some point they were decent with him. But I mean, if you get if he wants to stay there and build, a program, Vegas isn't the worst place to live either as a coach. So, I mean, go with the Rebels here. I would love to see them win, but even if not, props to UNLV. Great season.
Yeah, so my numbers on this one, I also have that kind of just as my first thing. Props to them for sitting at 6-1 and a chance to get a huge win here and potentially find their way to the Mountain West Conference title game. I don't think that was expected by anyone. But Joe, the last time UNLV won 6 or more games was in 2013 when they went 7-6. They have won double-digit games just once in program history when they went 11-2 all the way back in 1984. But those wins were vacated by the NCAA. So this is a team looking for their first double-digit victory season ever. That's pretty wild to say. And they've been around. It's not like they just became a program in the 2000s. They were, I believe it goes back to the 70s. They've been around since. And if they win this game against Fresno State, which would be a big one as a road dog in this game, they have matchups against New Mexico, which they should win. Wyoming, they get them at home, though. It's a big difference. Air Force, that's going to be a tough one. And San Jose State, they have the potential to go to double-digit wins in the regular season, find their way to 10-2. If not, maybe even just a 9-3 mark and get to that double-digit mark with a bowl win. So they have a lot brewing for them still and potential to make some noise. This is the second time Fresno State's been on the show, though, this year. They lost that in that game that we had them on earlier in the year against Wyoming. They have two contrasting styles. So UNLV has scored 40 or more in 5 of their 7 games, and Fresno has not given up more than 40 all season. So it's going to be if the high-powered offense of UNLV can find a way to score on this really strong Fresno State defense will ultimately dictate who comes out on top in this one. But I'm going to go with the Bulldogs to win here at home. I think it might be a little too premature to put UNLV in kind of that upper echelon. But as you were touching on, I like the track and the trajectory that they seem to be on. But I'm going to take UNLV to cover. They've been incredible against the spread all season. If you look at their wins, they've just been dominating teams. So I'll go UNLV plus 7.5 in the under 58.5 with a score Fresno State 30, UNLV 24. All right, last 2 segments of the show. Get to them quickly because we got to get out of here to watch a Game 7. Lock of the week. We already know mine, wink, wink, with the team that is red and yellow that plays in the state of California, having them score a lot of points. Joe, what is your lock of the week?
I'm going with a line that's just such a sucker line. And I saw it, I loved it, and I know that it's a lot of points. But it's Penn State minus 31.5. They're hosting Indiana. We've seen evidence in the past that James Franklin likes to cover the spread, even though he might not technically, be able to say he knows the spread. Wink, wink. This is a guy
be in the house for this game.
There we go. Beef's going to be there. I mean, 31.5. Fat Joe's fat lock of the week. Punch it in. Minus 31.5. I can just see Penn State. Their practice this week is probably hell. James Franklin's probably sitting there too all week thinking, I did it again. People are talking all this crap because I lost to Ohio State again, lost to a big game team again. I think they're going to come out on fire because they know that, at the end of the day, if Penn State, because they get Michigan at home, Penn State wins out.
Penn State wins out. They win. They go to the Big Ten championship game as long as Ohio State loses to Michigan.
Yeah, I mean,
I don't know how that works out or why that works that way, but
the Big Ten has the weirdest tiebreaker. I think one year we were talking like their main tiebreaker was like the out of conference record. And it's like, well, then Michigan should just keep doing what they're doing and play like Bowling Green 5 times. Like I don't know how they do it out there in the Big Ten. It's very weird with their tiebreakers, but
I think I'm going to take Penn State everything in this one. I'm going to take them first half. I'm going to take them full game, and I'll take their team total as well.
Yeah, I think they're going to smoke Indiana. I don't think the Hoosiers have a chance in this one. 31.5, my lock of the week.
All right, now we go to the dog of the day, our underdog on the money line pick. I'm going to take Kentucky at home. They're plus 3.5 in this one, plus 150. They're playing at home, as I said, against Tennessee. Tennessee coming off a hard-fought loss to Alabama last week. Florida ran all over Tennessee earlier in the year, and then Kentucky followed that up with running all over Florida a few weeks back. This is a team in Kentucky that can really run the football. As I said in that Florida game, showed that running for over 300 yards and what Florida did against Tennessee on the ground and what Alabama did against Tennessee on the ground last week. That kind of stuck out to me. This is a big game, I think, for Mark Stoops, as he's been talking a little bit. I don't know if he's getting ready to leave Kentucky, but this is one of those games where if they're going to stay in that 8, 9, 10 win range every year in the SEC, it's a big one for them. So give me Kentucky at home plus 3.5, plus 150 on the money line. I love the home dogs, and that's been one of my better plays of the year. Maybe not so much on the money line, but against a spread, that's been a really profitable play for me. So that is my dog of the day. What about you, Joe?
My dog of the day is Hawaii at home, plus 285 on the money line. Coyle's doing it the smart way and giving you a plus 150 dog that actually has a very good chance of winning. I, for some reason, in my stupid head, I'm like, oh, dog of the day. When I give it out, I got to do plus 200 or better. If it wasn't for that stupid rule in my brain, Wyoming would be my pick for the week. But instead, I'm going with Hawaii. They're at home. It's a midnight kick on the Big Island. So it'll be about, I think, 6 o'clock there. I believe they're 6 hours behind, maybe 5 hours behind. So it's either a 6 or 7 o'clock kickoff in Honolulu. I believe that Hawaii can get it done. San Jose State is not a very good team either. Hawaii is not very good either, though. I'm putting my faith in a 2-6 Hawaii. But San Jose State isn't great either. You know, they do have maybe I might be regretting this. San Jose State coming off back-to-back wins. I think they get cold here. Give me Hawaii at home.
All right. Well, that will do it for the college football show here at Beef Up Front. Week 9 already. Can't believe it. But as we've touched on the past few weeks, we're getting into some of these really good conference matchups, and that's what it's all about. So as always, thank you everyone for listening. Please like, subscribe, and we'll talk next week.